Brazilian choro, Argentinian tango, Cuban habanera, North American jazz. I love the way this music is formed out of African, indigenous, and European musical elements, so unique to this continent. These diverse cultures came together. It wasn't so pretty. We still have work to do. The music is a testament to our human resilience and bears compassionate witness to our painful history of colonialism, slavery, and loss of homeland. Music, like water, has the power to flow across boundaries, reminding us of our shared humanity. We only need to make space for it to do so, as listeners, composers, and performers. A year and a half ago, I was thrilled when the US had opened up to Cuba to have the opportunity to perform and teach at the Cuban-run Cello Festival of Havana with Jose Lezcano. Given the history of political strife between our governments, my primary goal was to build connection through music. My secondary goal was to bring badly needed musical supplies to an impoverished community, financially impoverished. Strings, sheet music, a cello. I was met with so much warmth and surprised at how at home I felt in the Cuban community. How best to approach these students, recognizing my very different cultural, educational, and political bias. These students were incredibly gifted, passionate, skilled. What could I bring? For example, one student played Bach with a Russian intensity, perhaps a holdover from the Soviet era, as well as a certain swing typical of popular Cuban music. What should my response be? This is very different than what I'm used to in circles that dominate the world stage today of historically informed Baroque performance practice. Should I try to get her to sound like that, knowing maybe it might open more international doors for her? Or would that be imposing a Eurocentric view on her playing? I decided that I served her best and empowered her most when I gave her the freedom to make her own choice about style, but instead focused on the fundamental harmonic structure in the Bach suite and encouraging her to communicate this, regardless of style. I also let her know how much I valued her unique or just different than mine approach. And in truth, she changed my listening. I now hear the connection between Bach and, say, Brazilian choros in the virtuosity and complexity of the music. I'm reminded that Baroque, especially early Baroque music and jazz, are similar in that they have a repeated chord structure. And in both genres, you improvise. Bach, you may not know, improvised all the time. I grew up in rural New York. I had hippie parents. I had a big family, 4 siblings, and I found solace in playing the Bach cello suites alone in my bedroom. But I was also very curious about other cultures and their musics. We were lucky to have neighbors who were indigenous Ecuadorians, and they would bring these Andean musicians who played these haunting melodies while we danced around a community bonfire, some kind of Andean step that I can't remember now, but it really transformed my listening as well. In college, I danced the samba and other African diaspora forms to the sounds of polyrhythmic drummers, live drummers. In Cuba, I finally began to find a voice that reflected the richness of all these experiences. In Cuba, I saw a community of musicians who moved fluidly between styles and inside of their different racial backgrounds. In Cuba, I began to see myself having a possibility to be an ambassador for a broad range of musical cultures. How can we create this kind of inclusiveness in North America? In the 20th century, Composers like Bernstein, Piazzolla, Gershwin incorporated styles like jazz and tango into Western art music in an effort to create a Western art music that more accurately represented who we are in America. We call this type of music hybridized music. Today's composers are taking it one step further. Thank you, Jose. I ask myself as a performer, how can I represent these styles with integrity and authenticity? How can I be more than a tourist? How can we as institutions and listeners open our doors to an experience of music that celebrates our differences and also reminds us of our shared humanity? As an example of hybridized music, we will now play for you an excerpt from Radames Niatali's Cello and Guitar Sonata. He's a Brazilian composer. And listen for the sections that have a more free approach and the sections that pulse with a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Imagine, if you will, a 13-year-old boy riding in the car with his dad to his guitar teacher's house in Miami's Little Havana. The year is 1973. He's a bit nervous because he's getting ready to play his first solo recital at the suggestion of his teacher, who is encouraging but also demanding in a kind-hearted way. That boy was me, and that first recital, given before parents, friends, and family, went relatively well. It was the beginning of a love affair with the guitar, but more importantly, with the world of music. After lessons, my dad would take me to a Cuban restaurant where we would eat Cuban sandwiches and mamey fruit milkshakes and listen to salsa music on the radio, boleros, cha-cha-chas, and more. That was also an important education for me. Later, I got to play a concerto with the South Florida Youth Symphony in 1974. And on the same concert, I heard Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. That opening swooping clarinet solo was a shock. And that mix of klezmer, jazz, and classical music was spellbinding to me. It spurred in me a desire to write music, but one that I would not seriously pursue until many years later, after I had completed my formal education and training and was teaching at Keene State College. Composing for me has been a mix of personal exploration, experimenting with various musical styles, and perhaps therapy for the rough patches in my life. Rebecca and I are going to play for you 7 Mile Bridge from my duo entitled Key West Suite. And if I could suggest what to listen for, it would be my obvious love of Cuban rhythms, jazz harmonies with a touch of flamenco. The guitar part rolls along in a way that might suggest that you're in a car rolling along that bridge, and the cello plays a syncopated melody with a Caribbean feel. When I play this piece, it reminds me of the summer of 2013 when I was living in Key West with my wife Ingrid during an artist residency there. We would ride bikes to the beach, barbecue at a house loaned to us, and drink mango margaritas. I hope that I have captured some of the feel of the place in this piece.